New York never truly sleeps, but for Sophia Reed, this was just another exhausting day coming to an end. Stepping out of the small cafe where she worked, she took a deep breath, trying to push past the fatigue. Her feet ached from standing all day, but there was no time to rest. This was her life. Sophia had no choice but to work hard. Losing her parents at a young age, she had become the sole provider for her younger sister. Every penny she earned went toward rent, food, and securing a future for the both of them. Life wasn't easy, but Sophia never complained. The October night carried a crisp chill, sending shivers down her spine. Pulling her thin coat tighter around herself, she quickened her pace, eager to reach the small apartment she called home. What she didn't know was that tonight would change her life forever. Outside the Hayes Grand Hotel, the glow of the streetlights cast long shadows over a tall man engaged in conversation with his subordinates. Alexander Hayes, one of the most powerful businessmen in New York, was discussing work, unaware that his son Ethan was playing with a ball nearby. And then, in one careless moment, the ball rolled into the street, and Ethan ran after it. A car was speeding toward him. Time seemed to slow. Sophia had just approached the hotel when she heard the sound of a child's laughter. She turned toward the noise, her eyes locking onto a small boy running straight into the street, his focus solely on the ball rolling ahead of him. She didn't think. Instinct took over, her legs moving before her brain could process what was happening. "Stop!" she shouted, but the boy didn't hear her. The roar of an engine cut through the night as a car sped toward him, showing no signs of slowing down. She had seconds to react. With every ounce of strength, she lunged forward, wrapping her arms around the boy and yanking both of them onto the sidewalk just as the car screeched past, missing them by mere inches. The rush of near disaster sent Sophia's heart pounding against her ribs. She clutched the child close, feeling his small frame tremble with shock and fear. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice slightly unsteady. The boy looked up at her, his bright blue eyes wide and glistening with tears. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice barely audible. A deep voice suddenly cut through the moment. "Ethan!" Sophia turned her head and saw a tall man striding toward them. The boy in her arms immediately perked up, his face lighting up. "Daddy!" he sobbed. Alexander Hayes knelt down, his hands quickly scanning his son for any injuries. Once satisfied that Ethan was unharmed, his dark gaze shifted to Sophia. But instead of gratitude, his expression was cold, unreadable. "Who are you?" His voice was sharp, yet there was a flicker of something else. Relief, perhaps, but quickly masked. Sophia couldn't believe it. She had just saved his son's life, and yet, instead of gratitude, all she got was cold scrutiny. Sophia blinked, still processing what had just happened. She had saved this man's child, yet instead of gratitude, all she got was a cold, scrutinizing stare. She clenched her fingers, keeping her voice steady. "Just someone who doesn't want to see a child get hurt." Alexander studied her for a long moment, as if trying to decipher something hidden beneath her words. Sophia didn't waver. She had met men like him before, especially at the cafe where she worked. Powerful, detached, used to having everything under control. Ethan still clung to Sophia, his small face pressed against her coat. Feeling his body tremble, she instinctively rubbed his back in comfort. "Are you okay, Ethan?" she asked, deliberately ignoring Alexander's piercing gaze. The boy nodded slightly but refused to let go of her. "Dad, she saved me," he whispered, looking up at Alexander. Sophia waited for a simple thank you. It never came. Instead, Alexander reached into his pocket, pulling out a business card and extending it toward her. "If you ever need anything, call this number." His voice was unreadable. Sophia glanced at the card, then back at his impassive face. She tucked the card into her pocket without making any promises. "Take better care of your son," she replied, before turning on her heel and walking away, unaware that Alexander's eyes remained fixed on her until she disappeared into the night. Sophia had assumed it was nothing more than a fleeting moment, a spontaneous act, a brief encounter with a stranger. She didn't think much about it, but Alexander Hayes did. The next morning, Just as Sophia was preparing for another long shift at the cafe, her phone rang unexpectedly, an unfamiliar number. She hesitated before answering. "Hello?" A calm, professional voice responded. "Miss Reed, I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Hayes. He would like to invite you to a VIP event at the Hayes Grand Hotel this evening. Your attendance is expected." Sophia frowned, suddenly recalling the business card Alexander had given her. But why would he invite her to something like this? "I think there's a mistake," she replied. "I'm just a waitress. I don't attend VIP events." The caller remained composed. "Mr. Hayes insists. A car will be sent to pick you up at 7 p.m. Please be ready." Before Sophia could protest, the call ended. She stared at her phone, her heart pounding. She didn't belong in Alexander Hayes's world, yet a small part of her, a part she couldn't quite ignore, was curious about why he wanted her there. That evening, standing in front of the Hayes Grand Hotel, she felt utterly out of place among the elegantly dressed guests. Stepping inside, she took in the dazzling luxury around her. And then she saw him. Alexander Hayes stood near the balcony, looking every bit the powerful man he was in a tailored black suit, his gaze sharp and unwavering as it landed on her. He walked toward her, slow and deliberate. "You came." Sophia crossed her arms, raising a brow. Did I really have a choice? Alexander smirked slightly, though his eyes remained unreadable. Not exactly. The room buzzed with conversation and the clinking of glasses, but Sophia felt like an outsider. The people here were nothing like her. Wealthy, powerful, moving with effortless confidence in their designer suits and gowns. She wasn't one of them. Her gaze remained on Alexander, waiting for an explanation. "Why am I here?" she asked, suspicion laced in her voice. Alexander didn't answer immediately. Instead, he offered her a glass of wine, which she declined with a shake of her head. A ghost of a smirk crossed his lips, as if he found her refusal amusing. "I invited you here because I wanted to thank you properly," he said smoothly. Sophia arched a brow. "And your idea of gratitude is dragging me to a fancy party?" Reaching into his suit pocket, Alexander pulled out a blank check and extended it toward her. "Write whatever amount you think is fair." Sophia froze. For a second, she could almost hear the voices from her past, people who had always assumed she wanted something, who had judged her before they even knew her. She exhaled, steadying herself, then pushed the check back toward him. "I didn't do it for money, and I never will." A flicker of something, surprise perhaps, crossed Alexander's face. Most people would have taken the offer without hesitation, but she didn't. Before he could respond, a small voice interrupted. "Miss Sophia." Ethan, dressed in a tiny tuxedo, ran up to her with a bright smile. "I missed you." Sophia laughed, kneeling down to ruffle his hair. "I missed you too, kiddo." Ethan turned to his father, his big blue eyes filled with hope. "Dad, can she stay with me?" Alexander studied Sophia for a long moment before finally turning to his son. "Maybe she can stay a little longer." Sophia glanced at him, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "Do you want a job, Sophia?" Alexander asked, his voice calm yet challenging. Sophia frowned, unsure if she had heard correctly. "You're offering me a job?" she asked, suspicion still laced in her voice. Alexander nodded, his tone calm and firm. "Ethan likes you. He needs someone who can spend time with him when I'm busy." Sophia glanced at Ethan. He was clutching her hand, his big blue eyes pleading. "I want you to stay with me," he said softly, almost like a whisper. Something tightened in Sophia's chest. She had no desire to be part of this world, but the way Ethan looked at her made her hesitate. "Would I be able to set my own hours?" she asked, weighing her options. Alexander smirked slightly. "Within reason." Sophia sighed. She knew she couldn't say no. "Fine, but I don't take charity. If I work for you, I want to be paid like any other employee." Alexander studied her for a long moment before nodding. "I wouldn't expect anything less." From that day on, Sophia became a part of Ethan's daily life. The little boy lit up every time she walked through the door, and soon Alexander's once cold home was filled with the sound of his son's laughter. What Sophia didn't realize was that Alexander had started changing too. Every night, instead of burying himself in work, he found himself watching them, watching her. He had never let anyone into his life this easily, yet somehow, Sophia, the stubborn girl who refused his money, had done just that. And that made her dangerous. As time passed, Sophia became an undeniable part of Ethan's life, and, unwillingly, part of Alexander's. Though he refused to admit it, Alexander found himself drawn to her. He wasn't used to this disruption, this loss of control. Sophia was unlike anyone he had ever met. She wasn't after money. She didn't try to impress him. And that was exactly why he couldn't look away. That evening, Alexander invited Sophia and Ethan to a high-profile charity gala. Sophia had hesitated at first, but Ethan had begged her to come. When she walked into the ballroom in a simple yet elegant dress, Alexander couldn't help but stare. But not everyone welcomed her presence. "Be careful, sweetheart." Sophia turned to find Victoria Lennox, a polished socialite standing before her with a knowing smirk. "Men like Alexander don't keep women like you around for long." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "I don't know what you mean." Victoria chuckled, sipping her wine. "Oh, don't play innocent. You're just a temporary amusement. When he gets bored, you'll be discarded like all the others before you." The words stung, but Sophia kept her face impassive. What hurt more was what she overheard moments later. A businessman was speaking to Alexander, his tone laced with amusement. "She seems different." Alexander was silent for a long moment before responding, his voice cold and detached. "They're all the same." Sophia froze. Her chest tightened as realization sank in. Maybe Victoria had been right all along. Sophia felt like a weight had settled in her chest. She shouldn't care about what Alexander had said, but no matter how hard she tried, the words echoed in her mind. "They're all the same," as if she meant nothing. The next morning, Sophia packed her things. As she dragged her suitcase down the stairs, Ethan came running, his small face filled with panic. "Miss Sophia, where are you going?" She knelt down, forcing a smile despite the ache in her heart. "I have to go, Ethan." The boy shook his head, tears welling in his big blue eyes. "But why? Did I do something wrong?" Sophia bit her lip, feeling her heart shatter. "No, sweetheart, you did nothing wrong," she whispered. "I just don't belong here." Before she could say another word, Ethan turned and ran. Taking a deep breath, she turned toward the door. But just as she reached for the handle, a tall figure stepped in front of her. Alexander stood there, his expression unreadable, but his dark eyes intense. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice low. Sophia gripped the handle of her suitcase. "Away from here." A heavy silence stretched between them. Alexander's jaw tensed, his gaze piercing into hers. "Why?" She let out a hollow laugh. "Funny how you're the one asking that." He studied her, as if searching for answers in her eyes. But Sophia didn't give him the chance. She walked past him, leaving everything behind. Alexander Hayes had never been the kind of man to chase after anyone. He never had to. The world came to him, drawn by his wealth, his power, the influence he commanded. But for the first time in his life, he was on the verge of losing something he couldn't buy. Sophia. And he couldn't let that happen. 2 days later, at a high-profile press conference, Alexander stepped onto the podium, facing a room full of reporters. They expected a business announcement, a corporate revelation. Instead, they got something no one could have predicted. Alexander took a deep breath before speaking, his voice steady, unwavering. There are many things in life that money can buy: success, status, security. But there's one thing it never could: love. The room fell silent. He continued, "I used to believe love was just another transaction, another deal, another negotiation, but then someone came along and proved me wrong." Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a small, delicate object, a paper crane. "She once told my son that love isn't about gifts, it's about time, about presence." His gaze swept over the crowd, his resolve unshakable. I don't care about the rules of this world. I only care about one thing, finding my way back to the woman who taught me what love truly means." Sophia never thought she'd hear words like that from Alexander Hayes, the cold, powerful businessman who once seemed untouchable. She sat frozen in front of the TV, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. She had told herself leaving was the right decision, but now, hearing his voice, seeing the raw honesty in his eyes, she knew she couldn't run anymore. Without another thought, she grabbed her coat and rushed out the door, weaving through the bustling streets of New York, her heart pounding with every step. Across the city, Alexander stood in the grand entryway of his mansion, his hands clenched into fists, his expression unreadable. He had done everything he could. Then the door burst open. Sophia stood there, breathless, her hair tousled by the wind. "You were looking for me," she whispered. Alexander took slow, deliberate steps toward her. "I never stopped." Before she could say another word, he pulled her into his arms, holding her as if letting go would mean losing her forever. A small voice broke through the moment. "Miss Sophia?" Ethan stood at the top of the staircase, his big blue eyes filled with hope. Through her tears, Sophia smiled. "I'm not going anywhere, kiddo." Alexander looked at her, his gaze full of unspoken promises. Never again. 1 month later, on a peaceful beach under the golden hues of the setting sun, Sophia and Alexander stood hand in hand. No more distance, no more doubt, just love, pure and unwavering. Ethan stood between them, holding a small velvet box with 2 wedding rings glistening inside. His face beamed with joy as he looked up at his father, then at Sophia. "Dad, Miss Sophia is going to stay with us forever now, right?" Alexander knelt beside his son, his expression softer than ever. "That's right, Ethan, she's part of our family now, forever." Sophia smiled through her tears, her heart full. As Alexander took her hand, slipping the ring onto her finger, his voice was steady, filled with conviction. "You changed my life in ways I never thought possible." Sophia held onto his hand, her eyes shining. "And you gave me a love I never dared to dream of." When their lips met, applause erupted around them, but all they felt was each other. The certainty that they had finally found home, not in a place, but in each other. Ethan laughed, wrapping his arms around them both. Their family was finally complete. As the sun dipped beyond the horizon, Alexander, Sophia, and Ethan walked forward together, hand in hand, toward a future filled with love, warmth, and the promise of never letting go. And this wasn't just an ending. It was a new beginning.